Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another exciting episode of Caught on the Mic. I love it because it's so rare when it happens, but when I have a return guest. He was featured on episode 109 back in September of 2023 on the eve of his release of his book, The World Wasn't Ready for You, a collection of short stories. Fantastic. And a lot has happened in a short period of time. And on February 3rd, 2026, he releases his first full-length novel, The Hospital at the End of the World. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome back my good friend, Justin C. Key. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing great. It's really great to be back here, and it's really great to see us both having leveled up. The time has been great to both of us. So it's great to be here. I'm excited about the release of this book. I'm excited to talk about that, all the things, and just catch up.
Yes. When you shot me that email and you said LeVar Burton had checked out the book, how was that for you? What kind of moment was that like for you?
So, to rewind it a little bit, like it was because he got interested. He found me as a writer through my short story collection, and maybe at the beginning of 2024. He followed me like on Twitter, and then he followed me on Instagram. And I just remember saying to my wife, like, LeVar Burton just followed me on both of these social media accounts. And in my head, I was like, well, he must have found me as a reader. What if he wants to? I started dreaming, what if he wants to read one of my stories on his podcast? And sure enough, my agent reached out to me and said, LeVar Burton, he's read your collection, really likes the title story. Would you like to have your story on there? I was like, of course. Growing up, reading Rainbow, all the things, being able to be on his radar,
Yes.
just alone on his radar, was a big moment for me. And then having him read my story on his podcast. And then, with this, I thought maybe it was also going to be, a Hail Mary, but I was like, okay, seems like he might be a fan of my work. Let's see if we could ask for a blurb. And it worked out. We sent him the book and he said nice things about it. And I couldn't be happier
Yeah.
with that. Just to to have him as someone who respects me as a writer, especially enough to put his name on it, to put his name on a blurb. Just top 10, top 5 moment for me.
One of my most favorite memes that I see floating around is it's a picture of Bob Ross, Steve Irwin, and Mr. Rogers talking about the heroes that the world really needs right
Yeah.
now. And I share that same sentiment as you. Like, I grew up on reading Rainbow when Alex Trebek unfortunately passed. I
Right.
was really hoping that LeVar was going to be the new host of
Yeah.
Jeopardy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. But let's rewind, like you said. Why don't you take a few moments, introduce yourself, kind of talk a little bit about your background, and then we'll kind of reset the table to where we're at today.
Okay. Okay. So I am Justin C. Key, and I'm a writer and a psychiatrist. And I say it in that order because some people might think that, oh, he's a psychiatrist who wanted to try his hand at fiction or science fiction. But no, I've been writing for longer than most of the things that I do. I've been writing before I went to medical school, before I became a father, before I became a husband. So grew up really with a book in my hand, voracious reader, graduated from Goosebumps to Michael Crichton and Stephen King. And then when in college, started to try to write my own stories. I was pre-med at the time. So two things as growing up that I wanted to be was a doctor and a writer. And there wasn't really too much outside pressure from that. No one in my family had really gone that far in either one. But from an early age, they knew that I had these interests and they called me Dr. Key. So I went to college as a pre-med with that in mind. But then as I filled those requirements and my schedule started to open up, took more creative writing classes, minored in English, and then sat down and really tried to to make something out of it. I read Stephen King's own writing very early on, which imprinted on me for better or for worse. He said the first million words of practice. He said write every day. He would bust out a first draft in 3 months, put it aside, work on the next thing. And that really helped me establish that writing muscle early on, so that when I went on to medical school and had less time to write as I became a family man and I wasn't able to like write 3 hours a day, I still knew that I was a writer. I still had put in the time for it. And then I was able to kind of develop or take the things that I was learning, the things that I was experiencing in life, and say something important about it on the page. Published short stories for a long time, basically, still am publishing short stories but from like 2014 to present day. And then a few years ago, got the opportunity to, work on a novel with a deal behind it,
Yes.
with my short story collection with HarperCollins. They took that and they were basically like, yeah, are you working on anything else? And I was like, I have been working on this thing for a little while now. It's a medical school story. It's about AI and it's about medicine. And they were like, all right, we'll take both of them. So that's what I've been working on since I last saw you, has really kind of turning that potential, turning that opportunity into a real product, the hospital at the end of the world. So the last couple of years has been a lot of editing, a lot of revising, a lot of trying to actually stay up to date with all the things that are happening now. And I am a full-time psychiatrist, so I do see patients full-time, and I continue to do so. Things have been busier in that regard since I last saw you. But I'm finding the balance. I'm a family man too. Have 3 kids, 11, 10, and 5, and they definitely keep me busy, keep me grounded. So those are my different facets.
Well, it's funny because we talked before we pressed record and briefly mentioned it after pressing record. What I have really enjoyed since I first met you a few years ago and being friends on social media and just kind of following each other's trajectories, it sounds like you and I kind of have a very similar balance structure that we're trying to maintain. And that is that family life, the daytime career life, and
Yeah.
these dreams and ambitions. And sometimes these ambitions can be like a second full-time job. And being a family man can be the third full-time job. You're always running. You know, kind of an aside from that, I know we shared a mutual affinity for Stephen King, and you talked about how he was a huge influence in your writing previously. One thing I noticed about your current bio and the press release for this book is you're citing yourself as a speculative fiction writer, which I think is really interesting for those that are not familiar. Can you kind of define that genre real quickly?
Yeah, so I think of speculative fiction genre is the overarching. So it includes horror, it includes science fiction, it includes fantasy. It's basically like if there's any element that is supposed to be different from the reality that we know, it falls under speculative, you know? And I came to that with the love of horror and Stephen King. There was a lot of Michael Crichton too. Like it was Michael Crichton and Stephen King, where if they were in like a race for they were neck and neck with me. Jurassic Park is my favorite novel, and Stephen King's my favorite author. So started with horror, but then as I went through medical school, just naturally, like the ideas that would come up, the things I was exposed to, like the what ifs, was science fiction. And I've dabbled in fantasy as well. Definitely not like hardcore, like George R. R. Martin level fantasy, but
Right.
things with like fantastical elements, or trying to kind of like dabble in those worlds. So just any type of speculative fiction, and any type of fiction where there's something different from the world that we know, like the rules are different. It's always been intriguing for me. And that was the short story collection, was really me going through the different aspects of that. There's some horror stories in there. I'd say maybe like a two-thirds or a half, one third to a half of it is horror, There's definitely like hard sci-fi. There's a little bit of fantasy in there. There's historical fiction with like a speculative element. And then the latest novel, Hospital at the End of the World, I would say it's like hard sci-fi, you know. So it
Yeah.
is, and with science fiction, these are I'm envisioning what could happen in the future. You know, I kind of think of it for thinking of kind of the Marvel universe, like Iron Man, like the first movie is science fiction, and then when you get later, it becomes fantasy. Star
Right.
Wars is fantasy, but don't
Right.
if that's gonna make people come at me, you can edit that part out.
Well, the reason I led off with talking about balancing our lives and getting a definition of what speculative fiction is the thing about your new novel, Hospital at the End of the World. I got to put that on camera. Um, it seems to me you're kind of blending science fiction with science fact to a scary extent,
Yeah.
right? Like even in the last 2 years, where AI has gone to the point where you can scroll social media and sometimes you don't know if a photograph or a video is AI or if it's real. And it feels like it's even gotten worse in the last couple of months. So, the premise of the book touches on a future where AI dominates healthcare and one medical student's search for truth. With core questions about medicine and humanity, what core questions about medicine and humanity were you trying to explore with the story?
Yes, knowing that from my experience, at least over the last 150 years, medicine and technology have been married to each other. And, you know, the advances that we've had in technology have allowed for the great advances in medical care. And there's a lot of that's still wrong with the medical system, but and that's always been with human doctors, at least mostly physicians, being at in the driver's seat and the technology being a tool, right? And my hope is that it continues that way. I think that's how like the quality of care continues to advance. You know, so there must be something innate about human interaction, and we know that. We know that from just going through and living life. You know, we know that from interacting with people. We know it from the different like nuances in culture. We know it in being able to communicate so much just in a small like facial changes. Really quick, you know, I saw this thing on social media recently and it said without moving your face, like go from a look that says like I hate you to I love you. And I think it was a comedian Kev on stage, and really it was uncanny. Like he went from looking like he really like he's looking at someone he abhors to someone he loves, and his face hardly moved. Right. So I think that our brains are very intact to having these subconscious connections with each other, and I think that that is comes through in medicine. I think it comes through in the doctor-patient interaction, and it's been shown in studies in terms of the placebo effect, et cetera. So really wanted to kind of highlight that in the book. And I even brought it out in, you know, what would be speculative elements, where there's research that shows that there is some innate like value of the universe that is the essence, this connection between humans, similar. And I was thinking in the way that like dark matter, we know it exists, but if
Right.
someone's like, well, show it to me, he's like, well, I can't, but I know it exists. So that was kind of where that a little bit that came from. And then thinking about AI, thinking about the advances in technology where there's hope, like in terms of it being like a tool, but where it threatens that human to human connection. And I think it threatens it by replacing it. And I think we see that in play in a lot of ways now where we're wondering, like, are we interacting with humans? Are we, you know, this picture that we see, it's invoking like some emotions in us. Is this from something that's made by another human, or is this something made by an algorithm? And how is that affecting like how I feel about it?
Yes. Yeah, and that's really what I was going to clarify here in just a moment is what do you see as the biggest societal risk in seeding medical decisions to AI systems? And how do you balance that worry with imagination in the novel?
Yeah, you know, I think the biggest risk is taking out that human intuition, that aspect in the interactions, and really it being a cold, calculating decision maker, and in some ways cementing like some of the biases that we have now. Because, it's fairly, I think, well known that, algorithms or AI systems, they can recreate or work within the biases that they're trained on. And I think the, hope that we have, I think, for humanity is that we continue to work towards like being better as we go forward. I fear that, AI systems, if it's cemented in that, and then they end up learning off of themselves, it ends up being something that you can't really bring out or you can't really take out, right? And then I think that the as a psychiatrist, specifically, like I know that human interaction and the healing that can come through, like thinking of like depression, for example, of being heard by another human. I think that is an innate thing of humanity, and I don't know if that can be replicated by an AI system. I think of it in the same way for like we watch sports, right? And we watch, for example, basketball. Like a robot could do all those things perfectly. It can do what Curry does, Steph Curry does perfectly. But the what amazes us is that it's someone like us is like doing that. There's something about like seeing our own flawed build, being able to do something that amazes. And I think you lose that in AI. So I think there are aspects of medicine that could definitely, you know, uh, be maybe handed over in some way. So, for example, if there might be, a technical procedure, I think that if a robot was doing that and it was still like being looked over by a human, but I still think that human needs to talk to the patient, explaining like what's going to happen, be able to follow up with them, take their concerns. And I think there's also something very deterministic about AI and computer systems. I was thinking about this in customer service, for example. And for better or for worse, let's say if you're a minute late to from the cutoff to get on the flight when you go to the airport, you're talking to a human. They might not do much, but there's there's something that you can appeal to. There's some hope that you can have. If it was an algorithm or computer, there's nothing really you could do unless you're a hacker. It's already just
Right.
made the decision. You know, and I think that in some parts of society that can level the playing field, but I think in other ways it's really going to kind of take away this human intuition part. So I'm really worried about that, and I'm worried about it more because I do think that AI has the potential right now to fill in like some of the gaps that's been left in a less than perfect medical system, where people have low access, where they do have, physicians or doctors that are burnt out and maybe is not really like paying attention to them, et cetera. You see it now where, people who may not be able to have connected with a good therapist or even get into therapy, they go into Chat GPT and it tells them what they want to hear. So I do think that, a lot of the flaws that we have now, it's making it ripe for AI to come in and say like, hey, I'll be here, I'll hold your hand, I'll be that perfect thing that you've been looking for. So I do think that, we've unfortunately, I think, made as a society, made almost kind of the perfect storm for kind of to AI to slide in and say, hey, let me take this thing over.
You know, you make a lot of really good points there and kind of tying it into the book itself. You have a main character that's kind of dealing with grief while you're talking about a system that is void of emotional intelligence. So Puck's journey starts off with his father's mysterious death. Without spoiling too much, what do you want readers to feel or experience or question through Puck's evolution?
So having Pac start in the position that he's in, like having grown up in New York, like at the center of a city that has really fully adopted technology, thinking about like someone who's born now, like, 20 years from now, all the things that's happening around us right now, they were like, this is weird. That's going to be their status. That's going to be their status quo. So I thought having a thoughtful and not rigid, malleable character that kind of starts with that perspective was necessary and powerful to when going to this new place like New Orleans, which is really like rejected AI, which is kind of the antithesis of this. So, it's not starting from a place of just assumed like anti-technology, anti-AI. Like I'm able to make an argument through guiding someone who was very invested in like this is the way of the future to show them like, hey, these are some of the things that we have to worry about when it comes to this way. These are the values of that way of practicing medicine that you thought was archaic or that you thought was old school, that you thought that was outdated. And through that, through his, grieving for his father, somebody that he very much respected and wanted to be a doctor because of his father, but also felt that, his father had kind of been left behind technologically. That complicates things too. He he inherently, I think, values more some of the things that his father valued as he's going through that grief. I think that he's more open to, okay, what did my father see in this? Whereas he may have not as much been that way if his father was still alive. If his father was still alive, would he, and let's say, and there wasn't like an impetus to go to Hippocrates, would he ever have considered that? I think no, he would have continued to try to apply to those medical schools that he thought was the next wave. So and that's a part of humanity, right? When we lose somebody, there's a lot of perspective, there's a lot of regrets, there's a lot of, I think valuing what they brought to the world because it's gone now. So I think Pac goes through a lot of that.
As a practicing psychiatrist, I'm sure, obviously I'm not going to ask you anything that HIPAA laws, but as a practicing psychiatrist, obviously we're seeing what that almost Skynet versus human
Yeah,
relationship take place in real time with people with cell phone addiction and AI technology, video game addiction,
yeah,
all of these things. Did some of those elements kind of crystallize themselves in your writing of this novel?
yeah. So I think that yes, in the sense of knowing that these technological advancements, these things that we have today, can be tools for some people and they can be hindrances for others. So, for example, the tracking devices that I have one, like I have a Whoop on, and it gives me insights about, sleep, heart rate, fitness, all these things, right? And I can imagine like two different people where like somebody it's very helpful for them to kind of reach whatever goals they may be going towards. Then I could see for someone else that it becomes either new anxiety or it feeds anxiety that's already there. Just the, constantly checking it, constantly trying to analyze like every difference. It's like, oh, what does it mean that like my recovery last night was off, but I had everything, I did everything right. I should have had a higher recovery last night. Is something wrong? Am I sick? So I was thinking about that as I was writing the book, just these different ways, these different insights into all the ways that the world is going about, not only in our own bodies, but just, outside, getting all this information about facial expressions or, intuitions about social interactions or, who likes you and who doesn't. Like our brains have really been designed to weed out a lot of what we perceive. Our perception is a percentage of actually like the information that we get in. And I think that's for a reason. And I really could see like this information overload being something that leads to anxiety. And so with that, you get these aspects of these devices or things that give reward, and then it's an easy way to get dopamine, and then you can see how easily somebody can become addicted to those things. Like that's what they're wanting to get over and over. Now, for me, for example, video games for me was a big part of my creativity and harnessing that, right? So I think that the in the different arenas that it might show up, it may be positive for someone and it may be very negative for someone else. So I had that in the back of my mind, to make sure that I wasn't going towards something was that I was saying is just like all out innately it's going to be negative for everyone, right? Because I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that's like, I'm not addicted to social media. I use it as a tool. It does well for
Right.
me. That hour that I scroll every day, what have you, I'm choosing to do it. I can put it down. That's very different from somebody else's perspective.
Yeah, for sure. So many things that you just brought up, and one of those for myself as a parent of teenage teenagers that are basically entering into their early 20s. We all have that Life 360 app on our phones. So we're able to see where everybody's at all times,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
then start to sweat the idea of like, why is my daughter been at this one location for this period of time? And it's funny because like you said, we look at these advancements in technology as tools, as practical people, but not everybody is a practical person. So everybody has a different experience with those tools. I was thinking about it this morning. I got up early this morning. I went to the gym, and I'm looking around and I'm like, it is, and we're recording this on the 5th of January. Normally, in years past, the gym would be standing room only,
mm,
and there was hardly anybody in the gym. And I thought to myself, I wonder how much meme culture and online stuff has influenced society in such a way that traditional habits have been broken, whether it
yeah.
be people with New Year's resolutions. I joke, but I'm serious. People posting videos of fireworks displays online, like checking in at different places. Technology has become so prominent in all of our lives that there are people out there that don't know the difference between it being a tool and it's sincerely just being a part of who they are now.
Yeah, I definitely think it's changing us. And it's interesting with the gym. I really haven't. I used to be like a gym rat. I used to go at like 4 a.m. I had this 24-hour gym that I would go to, and I could go like before like my shifts in the hospital. And then I haven't really been back to in-person gym much since the pandemic. I do things at home. But that's interesting. I do remember like at the top of the year, it being like that's when it's crowded. Everybody, okay,
Yep.
it's like everybody
Yep.
got their New Year resolution, like let's wait a few weeks. Um, but it's I think similar to COVID-19. I think this like the implications of what this is all kind of doing to us, like from a social standpoint, physiological standpoint, all those things, like 10, 20 years from now, like there's going to be, I think, some very interesting studies. And I think the same way in terms of technology today, just the exposure to different things. And, the flip side of looking at a picture and like, is this AI? The doubt that might come in. So for example, I believe I'm really bad with names, but I believe Anthony Joshua was the boxer who recently, I think it was
Yeah.
Jake
Beat
Paul.
Jake Paul. Yep.
Yeah, and then a few days later, got into this horrible car crash. And I remember I saw a video of it, and they were showing him being pulled out, and he looked like he had just come from the ring because he had his shirt off, he had boxer. So I immediately thought it was AI because I was
Right.
thinking like, I was thinking, okay, like AI would probably mostly have images of him being in the ring. Like this would be something that AI would kind of like with his algorithmic brain, and I was almost sure in my mind. I didn't yell it out just in case I was wrong. But I was like, this is AI. And then in a couple hours, like everybody who's posting it is going to be like, oh, this was AI. But then the real news stories came out or what have you confirming it. And I remember that moment. It was interesting because I mean, something like that can be confirmed, sooner or later, we know. But imagine like all the things that maybe aren't going to get confirmation that we may doubt, as that becomes more widespread, it then I think affects our empathy, it affects our response in the world. And I think even as we're exposed to different things, I might look at that and be like, that's not what it looks like when someone's in a car accident. I've seen these horrific videos. I thought that actually when I saw him, I was like, he doesn't look like he was just in an accident. This looks like this is fake, And I don't know. It's scary to think that I thought that was that wasn't real. It actually disturbed me a little bit that this person had been injured, and my first reaction was like, "Oh, this is fake."
Right.
You know?
No, that is so true. And I don't want to dive down this rabbit hole. I don't think
Yeah.
either one of us do.
Yeah.
But like with the socio-political discourse being the way it
Yeah.
is in our
Yeah.
country right now, I am scared as hell at how AI is going to be used in the future. Like we were talking about, all these photos are looking more photorealistic. All the videos are looking even more realistic to where, our country already has a truth problem, and this is only going to further it. And that's what scares me personally.
Yeah. One thing recently I saw movie House of Dynamite, and it's a great movie, thriller. I won't give too much. So basically, the premise is that a single unaccounted for like missile is launched from like the sea and is headed for the United States, and then like in 20 minutes, it shows all of like what goes on in decision making, and I think there's a lot of implications in terms of like who's in charge, who makes these decisions, how do you make the right decision. But one thing I was thinking about is that in the movie, and this is a slight spoiler, but not really, you never actually really they don't show a visual of the missile. And I imagine that they have like cameras on it or what have you, but I think one of the implications is that all what you're seeing is all this data, you're seeing like the computer aspects of it. And I imagine, how much of this could be fabricated by like some AI system, and then just, before anyone can be able to confirm like, hey, this isn't real. Like that whole movie was over like 18, 20 minutes, deciding the fate of the world. So when thinking about like if a technology could fabricate this and what somebody could do with like a powerful thing that just seeds doubt amongst like the different countries that have all these nuclear warheads. Yeah. I know we don't want to go down the rabbit hole, but actually,
Yes,
it's
no,
fairly
but it's
scary.
true. It's
Yeah.
true. It's true. And it's funny because I'm gonna again pull from absolute left field, but like some of my favorite movies to watch are found footage films. And it's not because of what you see, it's because of what you don't see. And that makes it more terrifying. And I think that's very much the case. Now I'm gonna have to check out this movie. Thanks, man.
Yeah. No, it's one of those love it or hate it ones actually. So, and you don't know whether you love it or hate it until the credits are rolling.
Well, let's step out of the world of T1000s and and everything along those lines. What has this experience been like for you from the world wasn't ready for you to like this novel coming out? Like if you were to summarize how it has impacted you as a human being, what has it been like for you?
Yeah, having the short story collection out, having the book out, and seeing it pop up in places, like seeing people read it and connect. It's been an amazing experience for me, just being able to something that I created, that I wrote, that I put, my heart into, somebody saying like, I connected on it on this level. This made me feel heard, or just like I love this story, or this was funny, or what have you. People that I would never otherwise like meet, which is one of the powerful parts I think of social media now. Like a lot of times when this happens, I'm definitely still in the stage where if somebody wants to reach out, I will see it and I will like it and I will love it, So that's been really great. I think going out and having this book now as a novel, and for it having just being a novel, having it have more potential, short story collections, just by their nature, they aren't going to have as much of a wide appeal. Though I think I've been very, grateful with how The World Wasn't Ready for You did. Having a novel out and being a novelist It's always been like the goal. I think of Kobe Bryant, when he was, I forget if they were up like 2-1 or 2-0, and he was like, "Job's not finished." It's kind of for better or for worse. And the short story collection came out. I was like, "Job's not finished." It's like
Yes.
that's great, but that's the appetizer for
Right.
this novel, and coming out the door and being able in 4 weeks and one day to be like, I'm a published novelist. I think that's amazing. And I'm, really excited already just to hear like people's response to it, like the things that come up, even, this conversation and just the questions that come up from somebody who's like gone through and seeing what I've written and how they connect with it. It's really amazing. And it's what I always wanted or dreamed about, like as a kid, like reading. I always thought that people who wrote stories and novelists, I thought they were smartest people in the universe. Because I was like, just this is amazing things that they've written, how they've been able to do it, and they're able to take me out of my room to wherever in the world or these other universes. I think that even more than doctors, I was like, those are the cream of the crop of society. Like, I wouldn't think that now because I am one, but I was imagining, I think, some of this response, people being able to really, I think, connect with the written word and words that I've written. So it's been great.
I love that. Now, we talked about the LeVar Burton connection. Has there been another hero or pop culture figure or somebody that you've had the opportunity to cross paths with as a result of this journey that just made you kind of stand beside yourself and like say, is this really happening right now?
Yeah, so Mary Robinette Kowal, she's been a voice in my head for a long time because she's part of a podcast, Writing Excuses. And I remember I would listen to that back in 2009 and onwards, for when I was just starting to kind of like, work that muscle, and the prompts that they would have, or the advice that they would have. I remember just listening to it while I was in the gym or as I was commuting to work. So then she read the short story collection and blurbed it. So that was like one of those like full circle moments. And the amazing thing about it is that I had met her at cons, and had met her as a fan. And then I met her again after the blurb came through at Worldcon, and I came up to her and I was like, I'm Justin Key. You blurred my out, but she was like, Justin, just very excited to see me, and actually
Yes.
got me into like the post awards party. Was able to be like, hey, he's with me. So I thought that was just amazing, kind of, I think, full circle moment. Just somebody that I really looked up to and took advice from, like thinking of me as a colleague. And I think with this one, I'm doing like a blog post to be on her. She has this thing called like my favorite bit, which is talking about like your favorite part of the novel, or just some aspect of the novel that maybe people may not know just off right. Being able to kind of talk about like the cool parts. So I'm excited about that.
I think as a natural progression of any type of growth journey, especially for a creative, there's a little bit of imposter syndrome that sets in. Are you experiencing that?
Yes. So yes, I have huge imposter syndrome,
I
which I
say
work
that
through.
as a fellow imposter
Yeah,
syndrome guy myself. So
yeah. So, I honestly, it's a work in progress. Even when, as blurbs have come through, my the first thing that comes to mind is like, oh, they're just being nice. Or even as this book is coming out in the world now, like, even as there's been nice blurbs about it, I'm like, what if this is just a big disappointment, or if people read it and be like, what were they talking about? So I think imposter syndrome is like a very big thing that I'm definitely working through, and trying to get to a place where, I can feel proud and accomplished about what I put out. I do think I'm able to do both. I do think that I know that this is a great accomplishment. I do think that I know that I put a lot of love into the characters, into the world, to even though it's briefly on the page, to the father-son relationship. I know that I've put in a lot of work, a lot of hours into, polishing and revising and really making this in, my debut my best foot forward. So I think I know that. And then there's also a part of me that's like, what if it's not good enough? What if,
Yeah.
what if people pick this up and then like, how'd this guy get like a book deal with HarperCollins? So a big part, it's a journey. It's a journey.
Brother, I got to tell you that over the last year, I've gone from dropping a podcast once every 10 days to pretty much every week, and some weeks twice a week. I experience that every morning a new podcast drop comes out. I'm like, oh man, they're gonna find out I'm a big fraud and I'm a big
Yeah.
phony, and it's gonna be all over for me. All my skeletons are gonna roll out of the closet, and so I mean, it doesn't go away, but I think as creatives, that's the thing that drives us. That's the thing that constantly motivates us, is to one up ourselves and have that sense of self competition. So I think a healthy dose of it is good.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I tell my therapist because she tries to get rid of it, and I'm like, but this is why I'm here. This is why I've got here. Like I gotta find a way to like coexist.
Yeah, that gym rat is still inside of you, my friend.
Yeah, yeah, so keeping it contained, but still also, you and it has been a good motivator for me at times. Like I did 10 years ago now, Clarion West, and I keep this brief. Like it's this, I have a tattoo on my shoulder. It's 6 weeks, like, writer's dream, 18 writers write a story a week and critique each other. And I think one week somebody's like, I really like the story for these reasons. I think that the prose wasn't like, they thought the weakness was the prose. So I was like, I'm going to show them, so that next, and not in the way of like, I want to master this. So the next story I really like was like, let me try to kind of to level up here, like read things that I feel like, is really good example of great prose and what have you. Long story short, like the next story that I did, remember the instructor was like it felt like a song, like so I do feel that when those criticisms may come, I think of it in my head, okay, I'm gonna do better at that next time,
Yes.
for better or for worse.
Yes. Yes. So speaking of next time, beyond this book, what stories are you eager to tell next? And are there themes or worlds that you haven't yet explored that you're excited about?
Yeah, so let's see. Okay. I have been working on, with nothing attached to it. I've been working on this body horror story. It's about psychopathy. It's about Schrodinger's cat and body horror. So it's kind of a return to my love of horror while incorporating the foundation I've built for science fiction and particularly like science fiction thrillers. So I've been working on that. Really excited about that. Um, let's see. I have a few short stories that either are going to come out or that I'm hopeful about coming out. I actually just recently wrote a short story like In This World, where like 20 years before the book, which it focuses on Philando, and just like the start of the Shepherd organization, and also you get to see him like being a father. One thing I've always wanted to do is a time loop story. Um, I really want to do a time loop story, just because I've just always found them like particularly entertaining and fascinating. From like Groundhog Day to was Palm Springs was a recent one that
Right.
came
That
out like
was
a few years ago.
great. Yes.
So I think there's a lot that can be done, I think, with time loop stories. And I also like, from a narrative standpoint, like when you see, like whether it's in movies or in books, like you go back and see a scene or a location that you've already seen, but now another layer is pulled back.
Hmm.
So that's something that I really want to. to explore. Maybe I'll do that this year, actually.
Yeah. Well, I know sometimes for NDA reasons you can't share, but has Hollywood's rung your bell yet?
So Hollywood is a whole lot of waiting. There is, you know, I've like celebrated something like two times in the same thing, like celebrated it two times in like the last year, and waiting for like that official thing to do the final celebration. It's at the point when I get like news, my wife is like, "Are we celebrating?" I was like, "We didn't already celebrated like a few times for this." But very, very hopeful. I mean, I think that, Hollywood is in a precarious place. And someone told me once that, publishing is no, 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 yes. And Hollywood is yes, 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 no. So,
Right.
it's one of those things that, and I've heard stories of it that, things can be all the way up to like production and then it falls apart. Or maybe it did, get filmed and then it just, it doesn't it ends up like sitting somewhere. But to answer your question, there are things that I'm hopeful for can be announced in 2026. And I thought maybe it was going to be announced like 3 months ago, but I'm still waiting. Yeah.
Well, you know who your guy is to share that with once it's all announced and said and done, my friend.
Yeah, as soon as it comes through, I'm gonna take a screenshot. I'm gonna send it right to you.
Well, Justin, it is as much of a pleasure as it was last time, if not more so. I'm glad to call you a friend. Why don't you take this opportunity, plug the book, and plug where people can find you online?
Yeah. So the Hospital at the End of the World by me, Justin C. Key, will come out February 3rd, 2026. You can pre-order it now wherever you like to get your books. I'm sure it's there. You can find me. My website is justinckey.com. My social media handles are mostly Justin C. Key, like Instagram, trying a little bit on TikTok. Don't judge me for it. And I
Actually,
still
I
am.
enjoy your TikToks, my friend.
Well,
Okay.
thanks. Well, thanks. Well, thanks. You and two other people. And then I think on X I'm still Justin K _ MD, trying to refigure out like you know what that looks like, so I don't post as much. Instagram, you message me on Instagram, I'm definitely in that mode where, I will respond, and respond excitedly. But yeah, that's where you can find me.
I think you and and I love this journey for the both of us because you and I are in a very similar place where we're kind of figuring things out at the same time and
Yeah,
simplifying our processes. Like, I think I've deleted and restarted and deleted an X account, Twitter account, like
yeah.
6 or 7 times already. It's not a place where I find my audience. So I stick to where I feel the audience is at. But all of that aside, I am so glad to know you, and I am so excited for what's next in your career. Thank you so much for doing the podcast again, Justin. The world's a much better place with you in it.
Well, thanks for having me. Thanks for having me. When I was, entering this stage to do these things again, you were one of the first people I thought about. I enjoyed our conversation last time, and like you said, you know, uh, continue to connect over social media, and I've seen like great things happen for you. So I'm glad we're able to, to celebrate this in a way together.
Yes, good people rise together.
Yeah.